Today's AskReddit post. What was your I'm in a toxic family moment? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. When I moved in with my so and noticed she called her family for things I would never call my own for because she actually likes them and doesn't see communicating with them as an obligation, but rather because she wanted them to be part of her everyday life. This is something I noticed with my husband too. He talks to his family almost daily and has a good familiar relationship with his parents. I talk to my family maybe twice a year and it fills me with dread. Doing family stuff with him is hard and it makes me uncomfortable to be around a normal family. Like I just don't know how to act, lol. I grew up in an incredibly unstable and violent family. I got out and haven't looked back. I'm 100% no contact now. My wife's family have group text chats. They FaceTime every week. They are in constant contact and clearly love each other. I don't even know how many nieces and nephews I have. It's been many years, but it still occasionally throws me for a loop. I can fully relate to this. I completely detached from anyone in my family that's still alive, although occasionally communicate with my sister via text. She'll tell me when someone in the family is dying and my reaction is just oh. I don't want to be heartless, but I never felt a positive connection and I don't really know any of them at this point, nor do they know me now. My birthday. I got you a pack of socks, but I realized I can get them cheaper from somewhere else, so I'm going to return them. My brother 2 weeks later. I think I'd like archery. Will you get me this $600 bow? Parents. Oh hell yes. I never got the socks. I feel you, man. Had similar shit as a kid. My dad paid for my sister's dorm room supplies and her car payments, all the while refusing to pay for mine. Why? A friend had this. Boys are expected to be independent, but girls are to be pampered and cherished. When my ex-sister-in-law broke into my house and started painting my living room while I was at work. Apparently, she didn't like the color and that would just ruin her Christmas. My mom said I love you at the end of a phone conversation when I was 22 and I realized it was the first time she ever said that. My dad said he was sorry for something he did for the first time in 27 years a couple months ago. I still tear up a bit when I reread his text. Hey, people change. I'd rather have someone apologize than ignore it ever happened. Yeah, it's amazing how much my dad has changed. He's still the same guy, but less of a get your shit together attitude and more well, why did that happen? How is your mental health? Whenever something bad happens in my life, IDK why he took such a drastic change in a couple years, but I'm glad. I think it might have been retirement, being financially secure, lots of free time. Getting old can really wake you the duck up. Source: I'm ducking old. My dad screamed at me for 20 minutes when I was 11, called me a bitch and told me to get the hell out of his house when I casually mentioned we seem to argue more than other families. Oh my gosh. Are you doing alright? Actually, probably a lot better than I should be. Therapy, moving out, and a coming to Jesus moment for my dad has helped our relationship immensely, as well as him coming to terms with his own childhood trauma and learning how to cope with anger in a healthier way. It was a rough set of years, but I also know my story is best case scenario, so I try not to bring it up too often since I know I'm in the minority, and don't want others who are still dealing with their trauma to feel less than. Can I ask, what does a coming to Jesus moment mean? It's a moment where you see the light on an otherwise unpleasant situation. It's usually extremely uncomfortable. For my dad, when I was 14, things hit an all-time low, and my mom was about to leave him. When he said he was willing to listen, she had my brother and I tell him how scared we were to be around him and how we generally hated being in the house because of the family dynamic. Note, my mom also did some pretty abusive stuff and never stood up for us when my dad got abusive. That was a whole other conversation. When I realized what sex was and that my family shouldn't be doing it to me. Not kidding. Ducked up childhood. Stories like yours always break my heart. I'm so sorry you went through that and I hope you're doing as well as you can. Well, to be honest, 35 years later and I'm finally just beginning to feel like I'm going somewhere better. Thanks. Good for you. Your parents were ducked. Told my mom I was depressed and she basically told me to deal with it myself. That was 4 years ago and I'm still having a shitty time of it. A while ago my mum saw my cuts. She pointed to them and said or was pulling a sad face, then proceeded to carry on with her day. When my overly religious grandma tried to defend her blatant favoritism of my older sister by telling me that I was born evil. Man, duck your grandma. Christ, what an awful thing to say. I don't understand how that grandma think that God likes what she says, like a WTF. Some people take religion too far and it has a bad influence on non-religious because they think almost everyone religious is like that. Exactly. My first memory is of my parents fighting when I was 3. I remember my mom looking at my dad and yelling, "This is why we're getting a divorce." They separated when I was 2, but took some time to figure out custody, as well as the actual finalization of their divorce. My mom was always so angry and would scream, throw things, and tell me consistently she didn't want me around. I finally had a breaking point with my mom the day before I turned 17. We got into a huge fight and I finally realized that she was just taking out the aggression of her past on me. I realized she had been blocking out the abuse she put me through, and finally brought it to her attention. I know her mother was an abusive alcoholic, and she kept perpetuating this cycle of abuse. What triggered the whole realization was when I dated someone for the first time when I was 16, and my BF's mom treated me like her own. It was the first time I felt welcome in a home. She made sure I ate because she knew I wasn't eating properly at home. She always had a bed made for me in case I ever needed a place to stay, and would always check in with my BF to make sure I was okay when I went home. I moved out the month I graduated high school, and I have not gone back to her house. I'm proud of you for stepping away from her. Hope you're doing better. Red heart. When I found out a lot of my family members are child predators and everyone knows but no one talks about it. My family is similar. My mom had to leave her family for several reasons. For example, she is a lesbian and no one in the family accepted that. What made her leave and never go back was after one of her cousins was caught naked with me. I was a baby and have no memory of it. When my mom flipped out, everyone was just like, well, he's family. He's just a little weird. You would think being a pedophile would be enough to disown someone. Nope, you still get invited to Thanksgiving. God forbid you're a lesbian though. Same with me, my cousin egged me to take off my clothes and my dad blamed me. I am really sorry that happened. My cousin was asked to babysit my sister and I when we were under 9 years old. He had some beer then asked us to play spin the bottle with him. He wouldn't take no for an answer, so we both put on every piece of clothing we owned then said, okay, let's play. He said no. Being kids, we left all the surplus clothing lying around. Bad, I know. And subsequently my mom said we were lying when we told her what happened. He was never asked to babysit us again though. It's really upsetting when someone close uses their age and trust to take advantage. I am really sorry that happened. My mom makes up lies then makes me look like the liar. It's called gaslighting. It's also just conveniently not remembering that she agreed to something previously. My mom does this all the time. So ducking frustrating. When my friend pointed out that most people are allowed to shower every day without having to negotiate it. That's so ducking strange. It's the type of unnecessary strange that makes me want to smash faces in. Please tell me you grew up in abject poverty, because only that type of behavior be understandable. Nope. Average middle class life. This continued until I was an adult with my own job contributing to expenses. 2. My kids shower every day because when they come back from the park or school, remember those? They're dirty and they ducking stink. Which is normal. You're living a life in the city, you're gonna stink at the end of the day. My wife told me most young elementary schools kids don't shower every day. I was shocked. Do they just go to bed and school stinky every day? I couldn't believe it. Whenever my mom would always tell me that I love my friends more than my family every time I get home from hanging out with my friends. Note that I seldom do leave the house to hang out with them, once every other week tops, because I'm mostly introverted. It's even worse if I go out for 2 consecutive days or more SMH. It's suffocating and stupid. Really? Can relate. Even if this hangout is something important like a 3-hour group study, they would use that against me for the rest of the week like I care about my friends more than I care for them. Well, maybe I do now because they don't seem to care at all for me. Also note that I only get to meet up with my friends once in a blue moon in person. Before the pandemic, say around every 8 months, strictly when we have an important agenda. I've lost touch with many childhood friends who moved to other countries because of this toxic relationship, and I can't even manage to make new ones along the way. Meeting regular parents and witnessing them actually be good to their kids. Help them, love them, and teach them valuable lessons about life. Not yelling for every small mistake they did. Also now realizing that not every raised hand is about to hit you, sometimes it's there to pet you. But unfortunately for me it wasn't the case. As a dad to a nearly 4-year-old, I can't imagine the mentality it would take to do that to a child. I am sorry to hear it happened to you. Hopefully later life has turned out better. Rooting for you. Rooting as English is hard and the other is bizarrely mean. For reference, I'm a boomer, so I've seen a ton of changes here in the dear old US of A. When I was in grade school, we were on vacation in Arkansas. Driving by a building I must assume was a diner burger joint of some kind. BC, it was visible from the road. Even more conspicuous was the enormous sign red in colored served in the rear with a big arrow. I was learning to read and practicing. Read the sign aloud. My father, who was driving, nodded his head and said, "Exactly as it should be." Even though I was only 6, that was my wake-up call. I'm not American, so I think I didn't get the context. Thinking face. Is colored referring to black people? Why would a diner be so blatantly racist? I have questions. You are correct. At the time, segregation was normal. The term often used was separate but equal, although it never was. Just another excuse to marginalize and hate. Every time I said I like this or that, I got immediately criticized or questioned or made fun of to make me feel like shit. Same place. I was in 2nd or 3rd grade and got mocked relentlessly because my favorite movie was Spirit, a stupid horse movie. And then even worse, when I wanted a horse plate for my birthday, I was embarrassed as a 7-year-old to like horses and ashamed to say a horse movie was my favorite. Sad. Man. What the duck? That movie is amazing. Still one of my favorites at 27. Screw your family. The soundtrack is amazing. Dude, right? When I got put in a children's home at 6 and the other kids there were scared of the stories I would tell about my home life. Gosh, that sounds terrible. I hope you're doing okay now. When my mom and dad finally separated because they finally admitted that all that fighting wasn't normal, I talked to them in my young teens about how I hate how they fight so much. And my mom said all married couples fight like that and that it was normal. Now I'm 18 and they separated this year, and they realized it is not normal or healthy to have discussions that involve screaming, tears, clenched fists and everything short of physically harming each other nearly every day. Neither of them are abusive. They are both good parents, but they were just in a bad relationship and thought that staying together would make me and my sisters happier. When in reality I wish they would have separated years ago. They brought out the worst in each other. And my mom came out as lesbian, so part of the reason she was angry all the time was from repressing her sexuality. Fighting is sometimes normalized, because it's true that every couple disagrees. Hearing that, people can start to think their situation is normal. It's never healthy to have a disagreement where either person is hyper-aroused or hip-aroused. Usually the hyper-aroused fights are worse than checking out. If someone is in a hyper-emotional state, they're not in a state to solve problems. They're usually in a state to make them worse. Both people in this state gets nasty. This should never happen, but realistically it will. My wife and I are pretty good about solving problems and taking time to cool off before getting into an emotional topic. It surprises some of our friends in unhealthy relationships to learn we have emotional fights once every few months now. That's down from every few weeks after some communication coaching for us both and some personal therapy, especially for her coming from a dysfunctional family. Anyway, if anyone reading this is having daily or weekly fights where emotions are high and no longer under control, realize that's not healthy. You may be able to benefit from couples therapy. Don't buy into the idea that fighting is normal. That's a very hard way to live your only life. My wife helped me come to the realization, out of myself and my two brothers, I was the only one to have never been arrested. Yet I was the only my parents did not buy a car for. I had to be moved out of the house, 2 ducking states away, and teach myself how to drive illegally to get my driver's license. But my brothers were sure taken care of and driving to school on their own. I had my wife, girlfriend at the time, over to my parents for Christmas dinner. My mom offers me a glass of champagne. About 2 months before my 21st birthday. No big deal, right? My stepdad proceeds to throw a temper tantrum about how I am underage and not in his house and all this shit. Well, a couple months later found out he bought my little brother, his biological child, a bottle of high-end bourbon for his 18th birthday. When I was in the service, they had a whole bunch of deep sea fishing trips and pro sports games they would go to without even so much as asking if I could come. They didn't come to my boot camp graduation that I offered to pay for. Didn't see me off when I was deployed. Wasn't there when I came back. Great times. Much more shit I can't think of right now. Geez, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. When I was in the high school band, I was first chair flute player. As soon as I could drive myself there, they stopped coming to my concerts. It hurt. I feel you. I just try not to dwell on it too much, but it does hurt. Side note, I was also in high school band, played the trombone. When my parents are arguing with each other, but then they just decide to come to my room and put all the blame on me, even though I have no idea what they're talking about, just so I can feel guilty and they can throw all their responsibilities on me. This happens to me a lot, but when it does, I just imagine they're telling me off for something very stupid, like so stupid that their opinion is completely invalid and it doesn't matter. When I was 4 years old, my mom told me that my parents divorced because dad was a drug alcohol addict. She neglected to mention her own problems, but suffice to say I've been stuck in the middle of their drama for 31 years now as an only child. I remember my dad not showing up to my school's Thanksgiving and eating alone. I remember sitting in the car watching my parents scream at each other. This happened again in high school when they put me in a mental hospital and the therapist tried to do family therapy. LOL. Now they fight over my child. How can they fight over your child? It's not theirs. Some people are fucked with a capital narcissist, like my grandmother. I'm 23, but my opinion doesn't matter, for I'm the youngest in the family. It took my therapist using the word, "My mom has had epilepsy since I was 1. I'm 24, and cognitive dysfunction. She's a toxic manipulator, and my dad and brother have severe anger issues. I'm afraid of the latter too because they've been violent in the past. I'm struggling so much to get through the next year till I can move out. I can't wait to not walk on eggshells and not dread my days off work. Soon. You've come this far. Just a little more. Freedom is so liberating." The day I joined a specialty school and was informed that it was not, in fact, normal for my father and brother to relentlessly mock me for my autism. Literally spent 15 years being called horrid things and being patronized for my interests. And I legitimately thought that was just what male family members did, because my mother would never stop them. When my mother and I were on a heated phone call with each other and she said how much I hurt her, and I had the courage to say, "Well, what about how you hurt me?" And her response was, "Well, yeah, I meant to hurt you." Big eye opener, that one. Man, I would have just said "duck you" and hung up. Yeah, I wish I was that bold back then. Nowadays I probably would. I was way too naive to how controlling she really was at the time. We had a missionary family staying with us, and the parents actually got input from their kids. The entire concept of being allowed to have my own feelings and thoughts was so foreign. My parents also treated us so much better when we had guests. Not getting beaten was so nice. I was at a family gathering a couple years ago for Christmas, and my uncle got genuinely mad when I refused a beer from him. I was 13. My parents stood up for me, so I definitely appreciate that. 7 years old. My dad hadn't been home for 3 days. My mom put us kids in the car and drove to every bar in town until she saw my dad's truck. Then she told me to go into the bar, look for my dad and tell him to come home. I refused. So she sent my 4-year-old brother in. 1 year later on a family trip I couldn't find my brother. The bathroom door of the house we were staying at was locked for a really long time. I had a bad feeling about it, so I just stood outside the door. Eventually my little brother and uncle came out of the bathroom. I asked what was going on and my uncle kept saying, "Nothing. Everything's fine. Everything's fine." Having been indoctrinated the previous school year about the dangers of child molesters, I dragged my brother away and asked my brother if my uncle had touched his penis. My brother said yes. I dragged him to my mother and told her. I could feel that the rest of the vacation was tense, but I have no idea what my parents did about it, if anything. That same year my uncle went to prison for molesting boys in our town. He's still in prison today. For years as a child my mother made me and my brother go to the prison on visitation days and spend time with that uncle. I realized my parents would never protect me, having been indoctrinated the previous school year about the dangers of child molesters. I'm so glad your school did that though. At least you were there for your brother. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.